I'm going to play just 15-20 seconds of a video. This is actually Nightwave Radio, and I hope it's a small enough portion. Um, we actually had a slight misunderstanding when I made a comment. I was just referring to how busy he was and complimenting him on that. I had just recently discovered him, and but he was really cool about it. He was insulting and whatnot at first. He was real cool, and he said something I had commented about Teddy Hart, and he was talking about him. They have a bit of a feud going, you might say. Um, and he explained when he responded that he talks about wrestling some. It's not his main thing, but that fans often come on there and give him grief. Because they're just young punks and defensive about every little thing. And I've noticed how Teddy Hart's fans are in particular, that Teddy can't do no wrong and they can't see the obvious. So anyway, he's cool, dude. He's good people. And this is just a few seconds, and then I have a few seconds from Fox News. But this is retaking the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond, Virginia. Um, and talk a little bit about um, how these news and media uh, is just being used to whip little pockets of people into a frenzy, and also to kind of justify their behavior, and a little piece about a 911 call where a gal had her infant child in the car and was told that they can't do anything, and was even told that they've been told not to do anything because it's a sanctioned event. But play a few seconds here where you'll hear the real vitriol coming from the people that are attacking this statue. You can hear the screaming and yelling. Um, I think if I played a few more seconds, you'd hear a lot of cussing and look at what they're fucking protecting, and um, this just shows you the mindset of the people doing this. And a person would meet with a whole lot more approval and do a lot more if it was really about a movement. If you conducted yourself in an entirely different way and went through official channels, and went to city councils and so on and so forth to try to have some of these statues removed, if that was what you wanted, and if you felt you really had a movement, you could gain ground that way, and it would be acceptable, and you could actually make progress. But that's not what it's about in these people's mind. Um, and it's just childish, and it's also about using the media to a person gets to just feel inundated with things, and you have to just turn away from it. And once you do that and you live for a few days, you see that in your world everything's fine, and none of it's might be happening somewhere, but you don't need to worry too much about it until it comes and affects you. And if something's happening in a faraway place, you can make a donation. You can decide how you feel about it. but when you're just inundated, it keeps the stress and the strain upon you, and they have people staying inside, wearing these masks, breathing your own carbon dioxide, suffocating a little bit, not getting the sun and the vitamin D you need, and then they want to add this stress and strain. And now, as soon as George Floyd has died down a little bit, and they kept that going a little bit with Bubba Wallace and NASCAR and other things, as soon as it dies down a little, they're back on the coronavirus, now predicting a second wave. Some cities and states going back to more restrictions and so forth. Play a few seconds of Fox News here. Someone at the occupied area
earlier this week, but guess
in
what?
Seattle.
Some protesters refusing to leave. As we're learning new information, many shop owners in that zone now plan to sue the city for abandoning their neighborhood.
Shop owners,
While
store
one of the
owners.
shooting victims is considering suing the police for not
But you hear that
responding to him
the shooting victim. A while back there was 2 shootings, and I believe it was one shooting at the same time. The first person to be shot and killed in the area there, and there's one that survived, was in critical for a while, and so this is the first I know that they even survived. Okay, and then someone in there has the nerve to call 911, and then EMT police arrive, and they're met with a line that won't let them in. And they tried to get in and tried to talk sense to them. They wouldn't let them in. And now someone in there wants to sue the police through suing the city of Seattle for the police and the EMTs not helping him. If you can believe that, the nerve of such a thing, they do their best to keep you inundated with these things and make them seem a whole lot more real in your day-to-day life than they really are, and to just stack on the stress. And they want to create a lot of these illusions, just like with a lot of things on the news and shootings that were happening with ISIS a few years ago, that once you look a little closer, they seem suspicious, and they feel like, I've studied the use of propaganda a little bit, just self-education, and I got interested in that when I took sociology in college, and so I've studied the use of propaganda by Hitler and everything, and back then people were a lot more naive, pictures, and especially moving pictures, were a lot newer at the time. And it was a lot easier. Hitler had photos taken of him with his niece and things that portrayed him as a gentle family man and things, because he wasn't married to Eva Braun at the time, and it didn't have kids or anything. And there was actually talk about Hitler and a lot of his officers being older bachelor type guys, and so even rumors about their homosexuality and so forth, and these were all completely staged photos and everything. But back then, people were not accustomed like they are now, and especially now we've had the internet and everything. It's hard to even believe that the media or governments would think that they could really fool people that much using, people have the advancements at their fingertips and are used to being inundated with the media. But, also all the new technology gives them the ability to try to do that too. So that's what they do, and we got to be on our guard. And, if we want to, we can put on the full armor of God every day, and we can pray and fight the fight against the principalities and powers, because we don't struggle against flesh and blood, and that's something that I do, and encourage everyone, even if you're not a Christian, to in some way to put on that armor and to keep yourself protected against these slings and arrows, because they're definitely from the enemy, whether you believe in Satan being real or not. There's an enemy hurling these slings from the media and everything at us. Let's see, what was another distraction that I think I mentioned was Bubba Wallace, and I've not really heard anyone. Of course, people are calling Bubba Smollett, Juicy or Jussie Smollett 2.0, another fake or hoaxed racist attack. But I have a thought on it. It reminds me of the WWE when Chris Benoit and his wife Nancy and the little boy died. Just within hours the next day was, I believe, Monday Night Raw, and they instantly came out with a tribute to Chris Benoit, who ultimately we found, of course, had killed his wife and the 7-year-old boy and then committed suicide. And if you go back and watch that tribute show, they have all of the stars come out and say something about Chris and, make compliments and everything. But one person is William Regal, or Lord Steven Regal from WCW, who I guess has worked at WWE and like management and as a agent and so forth for quite some time, I believe, 15 years or so perhaps. And it seems very telling what he had to say was just very brief, and that all he would say for the moment was more or less that Chris Benoit was probably the hardest working guy he'd ever known in wrestling, and for the moment, until he finds out more, that's all he's willing to say. Just very intense guy and into his work, probably the most hardest working wrestler he'd known. And I think that's very telling. Chris's intensity level was there when we saw his intensity with the Horsemen, and I think that's a big reason they went for him with the Horsemen was Tully. I remember Tony Schiavone would refer to Tully as Mr. Intensity, and I think that Chris kind of fulfilled that role that Tully had with the Horsemen, and I thought he was great. For these follow-up groups with the Horsemen, I thought that Chris and even Pillman, but definitely Chris was one of the very best, of these later groups of the Horsemen that actually was a reflection of the Horsemen at the time. But very intense into his work, and it just seems like a lot of things under the surface. But I think Lord Regal understood a lot more about Chris at the time, and he felt like something wasn't right. But they came out with all that right away. NASCAR comes out with everything the very next day. Everyone feeling so badly for Bubba Wallace, Bubba Smollett, walking with him and pushing his car and the whole scene. They had already taken down the Confederate flag and everything. I feel like NASCAR, or elements within NASCAR, not Bubba himself, it might have been fully within his knowledge, but that NASCAR ratings, they had their glory days in the 90s, glory days before that, but the 90s were just huge, huge. And certain ways that the business is done now that have changed and how their sponsors work and so forth, NASCAR has slipped in ratings. And of course, right now, all sports are slipping and are in an uncertain future. with the virus and everything, but I really feel like NASCAR or Elements Within fabricated this deal. You know, there's a rope with a loop at the end, and now we see a rope that does actually have the knot. It doesn't look like a slip knot like a noose would have, but it's tied in a way to where it looks like that. But the loop on it doesn't look like a slip knot, and it's only about big enough to put your hand in. And the knot is there so that you put your hand on it, and rather than just a loose string hanging, you pull, and your hand can slip and you get rope burn. You put your hand on that knot and you pull the garage door down. And how many times have we seen watching these auto garage shows and they step out and they yank the thing down behind them? You know, these guys work in garages, they drive cars, they're mechanics, and they're around these things and tools every day of their life, all day. You know, and there's things that are used and things that are improvised to work on cars, to when you're working with the tire machine and anything in the garage, and just it's a never ending day of things like that that are used for tools and improvisational tools. And what would the very first thing be when someone came to you, well, you know, say at my mother's work or at the mill, and someone comes and reports something like that? The first person that heard it would be, well, okay, where is this at? Let's go look at it and see it. And anyone, it should have took less than 30 seconds to solve this. But they had 15 FBI agents go out there, you know, but they don't have time to answer a 911 call. You know, I feel like this was a fabrication totally. You know, I won't show the video, but a gal called in, and this was a town in, well, we'll have a look anyway. 911 call. Maybe this will bring it up. No. Yeah. Okay, this is only 40 seconds anyway, so maybe I can just play.
Right now. But we would suggest you slowly drive through the area. Don't hit anyone with your vehicle.
Don't hit anyone, she says.
Get out of here. Okay. You have to be patient, but I'll let the officers know, okay?
Are you serious?
The city told us that we can't do anything, ma'am. The city told us that this is a sanctioned event.
Okay, you hear that? Listen to this.
You know, this is going to get dangerous. I got a kid here.
Yes, ma'am. It was just that you call up City Hall to let them know about your frustrations, because we're all very frustrated.
This is getting scary.
You hear that? She has an infant child there. And the fact that these people would carry on like this and they see the child, they're so concerned about lives, you know. And that's why people have an issue. For one, you can't say all lives matter. You certainly couldn't say white lives matter. You couldn't even say Mexican lives matter or anything else. Because if you do, then in their mind that's an adversarial stance. And it's like saying black lives don't matter, you know, to them. And of course, then you're a racist. You know, they trot that out so easily. It should be a crime of some sort to you know, depending on the circumstances, to accuse people of that anymore with how it's being pulled down and used as a tool, to accuse people of being racist, you know. You know, they chant that Black Lives Matter. Um, but a situation like this, any child, especially a child, you'd think would matter. Okay, but you have a situation like this where it's a white mother and child, and their safety didn't seem very important. And this is a Black Lives Matter protest group, and so that's just one reason why people will want to come out and say, well, look, all lives matter, because we see and hear things like that, and they don't seem too concerned about the safety of even a child. And you heard the 911 caller say that we can't do anything. We're told by the city that this is a sanctioned event. Sanctioned meaning it's approved, and that, uh, the authorities and powers that be have approved this event. They have made it possible. Like if you have a sporting event, the sanctioning body would approve that you have the necessary medical personnel there and that you meet the legal criterias, and they would provide EMTs in some cases and medical transport. They would approve the uh, venue that you have and do all these things to pay for and approve and legally make it possible. It makes it sound like it was approved by the city, and that they were paid for the event happening, and that even it's obviously a riot. Okay, it's not a protest, it's a riot. Okay, but that the city was complicit in this riot taking place. They were paid for it, they helped to plan it, and and that they agreed to not interfere or send police to the area and to let it happen, and so that it can be filmed and appear on the news and everything. And they just keep us inundated with these things. And now that George Floyd has died down largely, it's all over the place about a new wave of the coronavirus. And in my state, in my 5-county area, most of the counties have come out and basically wanted to pass laws that it's a misdemeanor. Basically, that if you go outside, you've got to have a mask. They're really saying in public areas or around people or in stores or at the bus stop where you can't maintain 6 feet or more distance, but they're kind of trying to push it as if you even go outside. But most of the sheriffs and so forth have come forward and put out statements saying that it's pretentious and ridiculous, and they were not consulted on the matter, and that they're not going to enforce something like that. That health is for education, not enforcement, especially at a time when the courts and the jails have grinded to a halt. They're not going to issue citations where people have to appear in court or do 24 hours in jail when they're not taking people to court and they're letting actual criminals out of jail. Anyway, this is the big unit, the big Arboski, and it's just another day. Keep up the struggle and do the right things. All right. Have a good one.